YouTube battle community, Beach Boys fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about the brand new Beach Boys album, The Beach Boys, live with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in London, I tell you. That's right. I've had a lot of people ask me to review this thing, and it's just taken me a while to get to it and to pick up a copy. I'm a forever broke college student, so buying $35 records doesn't happen too often. So, finally picked this thing up because I wanted to hear it as a full, cohesive piece. I didn't want to stream it on Spotify right off the bat. I wanted to hear it on record first, and then stream it after that once I wanted to listen to it more and start writing my thoughts down for the review. So, this album came to be basically off the heels of other projects similar to this one. Most recently, Aretha Franklin's songs have been redone with the orchestra. I think a couple have been done for Elvis, and then Roy Orbison also had one done as well. So this treatment is the popular, trendy thing to do with older recordings to make you buy the same songs you've already bought millions of times over again. So, hey, major labels. Anyways, this project has been brewing around for a very long time. I did find an interview with Mike Love from the early 90s in which he stated something around the fact of he thought this would be a cool idea to do something with an orchestra at some point. So it's not necessarily a new idea for the Beach Boys. It might be new for artists to have their older recordings redone with an orchestra, but I think for the Beach Boys themselves, they may have always felt like a symphonic treatment was going to be a possibility at some point, or something brewing in the background that might be a cool idea at some point. So the two guys who produced this thing, Nick Patrick and Don Reedman, they got together in early 2018 with the Royal Philharmonic, and they kind of picked out what songs they thought would be good. I think the Beach Boys had some input as well to what songs they thought would work well in this arrangement too, and they went to work. The thing with this album, it's definitely a mixed bag for me, and I feel like a lot of Beach Boys fans as well, because you're kind of messing with the Matisse, you're kind of taking a beautiful portrait and doing your own thing to it, which for a lot of people is like, and for a lot of people it's like, and for a lot of people it's like, okay. And that's kind of the overall feeling that I think a lot of people have with this whole release. Right off the bat, I love the packaging. I think the packaging is great. I love the cover, I love the symmetry, I love the logo, you got the orchestra down here, you got a superimposed Brian stuffed into this picture where he wasn't there originally. The back is just nice and simple, song names. The inside jacket I thought was great. You got a great shot of the orchestra doing their thing up there. You got the instrumentation on the original tracks, and of course the new orchestra as well, with some really quick liner notes by Don and Nick rather. So a couple of nice pictures of them down there too, and some sheet music and just some nice shots over there at EMI. Abbey Road, Studio One, probably the big one, Studio A. So this album in particular is four sides, two records, and they range pretty much from the early stuff to a couple of random choices, and then Kokomo. And this is where I guess we can just start talking about this thing. So it opens up with a thing called California Suite, which is kind of nice. It's kind of like, it's the orchestra getting ready, kind of playing with moods and feelings that maybe would have inspired Brian back in the day. It's got some bits of a 40s nostalgic, romantic type, syrupy string kind of production, stuff that he would have been hearing probably as a kid, which would have led to his development and becoming a songwriter and working with the arrangements he would go on to work with. But it also, I think, works as a warm-up, which a lot of orchestras, when you go to see an orchestra, they warm up a bit. They have a couple of seconds of warming up, or like a bagpipe band or whoever. They just do their thing before they get going. Kind of like The Who goes out and plays I Can't Explain every night. That's their warm-up song. That's their warm-up. You get into it. Which is funny that I mentioned The Who, because the last few notes of this track do sound like a bit of Amazing Journey going into Sparks, which I thought was cool. But instead of going into Sparks, it goes into California Girls. That is pretty cool. I think that transition works pretty well. It does give you that build-up of, it reminds me a little bit of the Love album by the Beatles, except that whereas all that stuff was done by the Beatles and they're sampling each themselves, this is all, for the most part, redone tracks with the orchestra. There are bits and pieces that are the original recordings with the orchestra on top of that. But for the most part, a lot of this album is completely redone or very heavily focused on the orchestra, maybe burying away some of the original recording tracks. It's a mixture of both. The redone California Girls, though, pays really careful consideration to the original track itself, because you gotta remember, when these songs were made, Brian had a certain image in his head, and a certain presentation in his head that wasn't going to be perfect until it was perfect, and it wasn't going to be released until that vision was complete. And so, to have someone else redo that music and then put the Beach Boys vocals on top is really hard to do, because that vibe and that message and that spirit that he created back in the day, and then the Beach Boys sing on top of that, is part of the magic of the Beach Boys. And so taking that away and then doing your own thing and just throwing the Beach Boys vocals on top, kind of a gutsy move, man. Kind of a gutsy move. For the most part, though, it remains pretty much untouched. It's pretty close to the original. The bits and pieces that pop up with the orchestra are nice. You know, they're nice. It's okay. Wouldn't It Be Nice has a little bit of a small intro beforehand, and a lot of the songs on this album do that, where they have a bit of an intro to lead you into the song itself. It's a little bit somber, and I think that, like, hinting at darkness kind of lends itself well, because by the time you get to the actual track itself, you've left that darkness to enter the beautiful world of Wouldn't It Be Nice. This track in particular leads me to the rest of this album very heavily, and that's the drumming. I'm a stickler for drums, being a drummer myself. The original tracks, when they were done with Hal Blaine, his timing and his power and his delivery, and the emotion and the character of his drumming, beyond the fact that we've only known those recordings for the last 50 years, the emotion that they emit and the dynamics that they add to the other instruments and how they play well with others really is super effective with those original recordings. Having someone else do these drums where it's not mic'd the way Brian had it mic'd, it's not layered the way Brian had it layered, it's one guy hitting the drums, and it's really, for me, lacking. I do not like a lot of the drums on this album. They're very soulless. And just my opinion, I'm just some tiny little guy on the internet, so don't get pissed off and start throwing things at your computer because you disagree. It's just my little opinion, but the drums on this album for me are not cutting it. And right off of this song, we're 2 tracks in, and I'm already like, oh my god. So this song in particular, though, is almost void of other added instrumentation from the orchestra, whereas a lot of these songs, they kind of throw bits and pieces in here and there where there's like a blank space, and they just like toss something in there to do it. Fun. The intro here is interesting, but again, the drums are anemic for me. They're pretty weak. Whereas in the original one, they're pretty heavy-handed, and they're a lot of fun to listen to. This song in particular for me does not work with the orchestral arrangement. This is a rock and roll song about getting in your T-Bird, hiding away from your parents, doing your own thing. It's rock and roll rebellion. It's going out and being a teenager. And the syrupy string additions do nothing for me on this one at all. I think they're completely superfluous and don't make any sense. And I really feel like they're stuffing orchestral bits into the open space that was left by the original track. And when you do that, you suffocate the song, because the whole point of empty space in a song is that the song will say more without saying something than it does if you just stuff a bunch of stuff into it. So this is a lot of the problem I have with this album as well too, is that a lot of it really is, oh, there's a blank space here, shove something in there. Oh, there's a little bit of empty space here, put a swirly thing in there. Of course, I don't know the actual terms for these things. I don't play those instruments. That for me hurts a lot of this album, where it really feels like they took the original track and said, oh, there's a blank space, and don't worry, baby, I just throw something in there, it'll fit. That doesn't do anything. You're just adding a string section to a song that already exists. I can get on my keyboard and do that too. Like, it doesn't make sense for me to have that there. Which leads me to Don't Worry Baby, the next track on here. Again, from one of the most iconic drum intros of the 60s, it's just not here. The strings do work well in this song, I think. I think because they're more gentle and they're more subdued. They're not in your face and they're not trying to, like, let you know that they're there. I think having them in the background a little bit does add a little bit of, you know, saccharin to it. Is that the word? A little bit of sweetness to it. It's pretty effective, except I don't like the cheesy, sweepy stuff they do in the middle bit. That just doesn't do anything for me. Maybe I just don't get orchestral stuff. I like orchestral stuff, don't get me wrong, but again, you're messing with art here, okay? You're asking a lot from me at this point. So that ends side A on the first record. Side B starts off with God Only Knows, and there's a very light intro that leads this song into the reworked track, but again, the drums on this one, the breaks on this one for the drums. Dun, 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 dun. That part, they don't work. They're way too rigid, way too militaristic, they're way too straightforward. They're just played because a piece of paper says what to play, and there's no soul to it. Again, just my opinion, just some nobody on the internet, that's all. Easily one of my least favorite tracks on this whole album because of the arrangement done to it. Not feeling this one at all. Sloop John B. Finally, this is what the album could be. They take the song and completely redo it with all of these instruments. This is how the album could have been done. If you find the right tracks and just redo the whole instrumentation with these orchestral arrangements, that makes for a very effective listen. When you're just throwing strings on top of fun, who cares? But like, when you like redo the track and then put the Beach Boys vocals on top of it, that makes for a very creative and interesting listen. So for this one in particular, the tubas, the woodwinds, everything combines really well for a really cool sounding track. It almost sounds like a Sousa march, which I like a lot. It's a whole different vibe, but it really works. This more original reimagining is what the album should have been, and I like the extended outro. They elongate the vocal bits a little bit more. So if the whole album was made up of songs that were in this vein, you would have had an amazing listening experience. Hands down, would have been so much fun to listen to. Yeah, Sloop John B, easily one of the best songs on this album. Heroes and Villains, very pointless intro on this one. I don't understand why they did the intro for it. Nothing to do with the rest of the song at all. I feel like the tambourine and the bell work on like on the cymbals, or even like some of the actual bell sounding instruments, they work more in the vocal areas. So that's kind of cool. But overall, not too much to say about that one. Then Disney Girls. Thank you again. Perfect choice for a song. Absolutely brilliant choice. That song already has elements that are... the song itself is at a slower pace, which allows for strings, I think, to be added very effectively. The lyrical content, the way Bruce sings it, a lot of it is very sweet. A lot of it is meant to be nostalgic and have a bend of Disney movie-esque sounding music to it, reminiscent of childhood. So, that's what strings and orchestral instruments can lend themselves to that imagery very well, because we've been accustomed to hear those things to make us think of dreaming or whatever the case might be. So that works really well. This is easily the best song on the album, because again, they reimagined it. They took the song and then did an orchestral thing to it without really using much of the original track at all, besides the vocal bits. But that really, really works. Very well done. Excellently executed. Great track. Second record starts off with Here Today. This was an interesting choice. I wasn't expecting to see this song on here, but decent use of the strings, but they took away the thunderous drums on this one, and it just kind of, again, cuts like a knife, but it feels so right. No, it doesn't. It kind of loses the anxious feel, and feels more like a high school marching band, and not in the anthemic way that Sloop John B had. It was more like, yeah, Friday night football game at the local high school. It just doesn't work for me. Um, the magic of this song, it's such a painful song. I mean, love is here today and gone tomorrow. Like, one an amazing line. And you take the magic and the atmosphere and the spookiness and the anxiety of the song, you strip all that away, you kick it in the throat, and you leave it cuffing for air on the ground. But while it's on the ground, it doesn't care that it wants any more breath. It's so lacking. It just doesn't do anything. No. In My Room isn't too bad. It definitely gives that early 60s romantic feel that you would come to see from like an early 60s movie, like a romantic comedy that we would call them now type movie. It's not bad. I like the sparseness to it. I think this arrangement's kind of just gently gliding over it, which isn't too bad. Up next is Kokomo. No. Just, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You're taking something that has zero room for improvement or addition. The only thing that would have worked in its favor at all would have been like maybe a guitar solo. But this song itself doesn't lend itself to an orchestral arrangement. It doesn't work. It's not meant for that. It doesn't work. It sounds very cartoony. Not feeling that one at all. Warmth of the Sun. Another short intro leaves this one off again. But the same kind of deal. Like, it's got orchestral bits just to fill in the blank spaces that are there. But the blank spaces are extremely effective because you're adding to the energy and the emotion and the delivery of the track. It's a heartbreaking tale about love that's gone. And if you just stuff it with orchestral things or whatever the case may be, you lose the soul of the track, and it just becomes the Beach Boys with orchestral stuff thrown all over it for the hell of it to make a record for you to buy the same songs again. It doesn't make sense. Darlin' starts off side 4, and this one's pretty decent. It sounds pretty fresh for some reason. There's moments of it that sound pretty new. But again, the strings are awkward. They feel out of place. The ending, I think, was cool, but overall, I feel like the strings are trying too hard on this album. On this song, but on the album, yeah. Help Me Rhonda, this track shouldn't have been on here at all either. It does not make, it just, nope, doesn't work. The original guitars are on this thing, which is pretty cool, but just doesn't work. It's superfluous, again, doesn't work. You Still Believe in Me, that was an interesting choice. I did not see that one coming either, but I like the echo on Brian's voice. The additions here aren't too bad. Very minimal, and I think that's what helps it, because again, a super soft, sensitive track doesn't need a ton of things added to it. It just doesn't. And then the last track on here, Good Vibrations, that's a real gutsy move. That's a really gutsy move. That's like taking the Declaration of Independence and then using a crayon to draw a border around it or something. It doesn't need anything else. It just doesn't. For one of the biggest masterpieces of the last 20th century, it just doesn't work. So, overall, this album for me, it's one of those things you might listen to it once or twice and go, oh, that's cool, and put it away and then forget about it forever. It did hit number 1 on the classical charts, so that's cool, but it hit the actual Billboard 200 somewhere too. I don't remember where it bubbled in, but if this is like the only Beach Boys album you ever owned, then I guess cool, you have a Beach Boys album. But for me, I will just go listen to the actual songs, because that's all we need. The thing is, the most important thing that I took away from this album is that if they had chosen completely different tracks, not only would they have a hard time selling this album, but marketing it and everything else to non-Beach Boys fans, or not even that. It's just if they tried to do an album where all the songs were more obscure, but they would lend itself very well to an orchestral arrangement, it wouldn't sell. They already have a hard enough time selling their albums anymore anyway, but I really think because you have, oh, hey, it's got California Girls, Fun, 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 Don't Worry Baby, Kokomo, In My Room, Good Vibrations. People see that and they go, oh, I know those songs. Okay, I'll pick it up. But, you know, we got Disney Girls on here. You've got You Still Believe in Me and Here Today. So those three choices right there are very, very cool to see that they took a risk with those. I think more than anything, the biggest risk was with Disney Girls, and that risk paid off in Dividends because that is the best song on the album. It works really well. So does Sloop John B. But really, if they had dug through the archives and picked out more of their ballads and just rearranged them, I think you could have done something very cool with Please Let Me Wonder. Or The Lonely Sea, I think, would have been a very effective song. I really think you could have done something off Sunflower. I think if you took Forever, I think you could have made something completely different out of Forever. So, you know, the song choices themselves are troubling because you could have done so much more with other tracks. But that's the thing. If people pick up a new Beach Boys album and they look at the back and they see, well, I only know 2 of these songs, I'm not going to buy this. Oh, but I know all these other ones, I'll buy it. I think that's where it comes into play. So, overall, not the biggest fan of this album. I don't see myself playing it that much, or much more at all, really. I think I'll give it a try another few more times after this, but really, I don't have to go back to it. I just don't. The copy I have is on black vinyl with the orange label. I will give them a lot of credit, though. The packaging on it is very, very nice. You can tell the records were rush-made, though. Bits of vinyl coming off the actual record itself, and the inner hole, the punch-out hole, is very, very tight and kind of choppily made. But that's the risk you take with buying new records in 2018, because record companies or record plants and pressing plants are so overrun and overworked that some of the quality might go downhill a little bit. But I love the cover. I love the back cover. I think the packaging on it is fantastic. It looks great. But overall, I don't think they did this right. Again, just my tiny little opinion. I am nobody. This is the London Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. It's some of the most insanely talented people in the world with extreme talent that I will never be able to understand. But it's only rock and roll. I mean, you know, overall, I'd give this album, I think the intention behind it was extremely pure and honest, and I think it came from a good place. And I think they had the best of intention for it, and they really gave it their all to do what they thought would be a special treatment. And for that, great. You know, for that feeling, I'll give you guys a 7 out of 10, because that's awesome. You know, you're all Beach Boys fans, you want to do something cool for the Beach Boys, I get it, that's great. But for me as a fan, and for a lot of other people, you know, I've been hearing these songs for my entire life. Hearing them with this treatment just doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound right. It feels superfluous in so many ways. So I have to give this thing, I'm going to give this thing like a 4 or a 5 out of 10. I don't think it's necessary. That's a really harsh thing to say, but I think if they had chosen completely different songs and, you know, did more of the original interesting arrangements like Sloop John B and Disney Girls, but did a whole album like that with more obscure stuff, yes, you'd have an extremely, extremely effective album. So if that is how I feel about it, Royal Philharmonica, Don and Nick, go do another one. Make a second one. Make volume 2. I think there's 2 for Elvis at this point. So make a second Beach Boys one. Do Forever. Do Lonely Sea. Do Please Let Me Wonder. Do In the Back of My Mind. You know, find these tracks that aren't well known and then make them well known. Give them a chance. Let people be aware of them with your amazing instrumentation that you can totally do. So I'm not knocking anybody's talent. I'm not knocking anybody's intentions. I'm just saying, from a listening experience, hearing this thing at the end of the day, not my cup of tea, man. So that's it. My name is Giggens. This has been a super long review. Thank you so much for watching. Beach Boys, Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. I'm going with a 4 or 5 out of this one, out of 10. And that's it. Really, really curious to see what you guys all have to say about this one. I know this has been a big deal for a lot of people. So, super interested to talk about it with you guys. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Giggens. Bye-bye.